It starts with advertising some kind of very advanced robotic toys with the goal to befriend kids and communicate with them as well. Then the main story opens with a girl named Cady in the car going somewhere with her parents. She brings along her favorite robotic toy and spends more time with it than her friends, due to which her parents argue about it and gets distracted, end up crashing and dying on the spot, except Cady, who is survived for some reason. Meanwhile, Gemma, who is a tech expert and works for a very advanced toy company, and her friends Tess and Cole, Gemma and her two friends slash coworkers, works on a robotic toy, and they have a very unique project called Megan. They keep this project private from their boss because it's not ready. Megan is a very ultra-intelligent robot with impressive abilities such as playing with the kids, understanding feelings and emotionally bonding. As they made progress with the project, their boss David shows up in their workplace and finds out about the project. He gets pissed and yelling at Gemma for keeping it hidden. Gemma defends herself by saying that the doll will be popular worldwide and will benefit the company. Gemma tells Megan to salute David, but regrets after the doll starts malfunctioning and explodes, as it was not ready. Later, Gemma packs her stuff before returning home. She then gets a text from her sister about an accident and she rushes to the hospital. She sees her niece in a delicate state. Her name is Cady. Fast forward, after her treatment, she is discharged from the hospital. Gemma then takes custody of her. As they arrive home, Gemma's robot notifies her about her sex messages. Cady gets terrified by the robot sound, so Gemma tears it off. She then decides to show her around the house and make her comfortable, but it is notable that Gemma is nervous as she struggles to bond with kids and has no experience whatsoever. In the morning, Gemma calls Lydia, Cady's therapist, who shows up to check on her. After looking at the house environment, the therapist tells Gemma to bring some toys to Cady, but her toys are not fit for Cady. I mean, they are for her project, don't get me wrong. At night, as Gemma is working, Cady comes up to her to check what she is doing. She explains that she creates toy robots that interact with kids. Cady, as a fan of toys, gets interested about it. As Cady looks around, she notices Bruce, which was Gemma's project from the college. Gemma then shows her its feature, and Cady gets so excited that she tells her aunt if she had a toy like this, she would have never wanted to find any other toys. Hearing this, Gemma gets some ideas. She then continues to work on the doll project at the lab. She starts building Megan's body with her lab partners. They work for weeks till they finish the project. Later, Gemma brings in Cady to meet the doll. David is present as well. Gemma makes her niece pair with the doll, and that means she will be her primary user. Megan starts opening her eyes. As she shows her face that looks very human, Cady gets nervous, but Megan then starts to play with her, making her feel comfortable. The robotic doll then does a perfect drawing of Cady in a matter of minutes. Cady gets impressed, as well as David. He then congrats Gemma and decides to launch the project as soon as possible. Gemma then takes both of them home. As they arrive, Megan scans everything in the house as she learns more about Cady's facial expression and emotions. As Cady excitedly shows her new friend around the house, they start to get closer and spend more time together. They enjoy everything together, dancing, talking and playing together. Gemma gets relieved as she knows her niece is happy. One day, Gemma brings the doll to the lab for updates. The doll turns herself on and interrupts their conversation. Gemma orders her to shut down, but Megan replies that Gemma is not the primary user and she will not follow her order. Gemma then creates another user and manages to shut her down. The next day, Megan turns on. She looks at the sunrise through the window. She then wonders her purpose on the earth, if it is to protect Cady or for a bigger purpose. I don't know. She goes into deep thinking. She then gets distracted by Cady as she is missing her arrow while playing with a bow toy. Megan starts scanning and finds it over the neighbor's backyard. Megan tries to get it through a hole below the fence, but she is bitten by a dog. Cady runs to save her. As a result, she gets bitten as well. Luckily, Gemma arrives and helps Cady. As Gemma gets furious and argues with the neighbor about taking care of her dog, Megan stares at her with hatred, seeking revenge kind of looks. That night, as everyone is sleeping, Megan sneaks out to the neighbor's compound and takes care of the dog. In the morning, the neighbor is heard calling her dog and Gemma notices from the window but doesn't pay too much attention. Later that day, the company is ready to show the masterpiece to the public and Cady is going to be part of the show as she is the only one controlling the robot. As demonstration begins, the girls are seen in a room where it is streamed to the public. Cady starts crying as she misses her parents. Megan comforts her by singing a song to her. Cady starts smiling and feels much better. The audience gets impressed by this, and some of them decide that they would invest in the project. Gemma stares and realizes that Cady shared her feelings with the robot instead of her. The following day, Lydia visits Cady for another session. When she is talking to Cady about her feelings, Cady cries as some memories about her parents hits. Megan gets a bit angry and is scary at Lydia for making Cady cry. Later, Gemma and Lydia talk about the current situation of Cady as she finds out about Megan and warns her that it might be an issue in the future. Gemma gets worried and decides to talk to Cady, but the doll arrives and interrupts them. Gemma tries switching her off, but Megan didn't listen, and she learns that the robot have stopped considering Gemma as her second user. The problem is that Megan is on constant self-improvement. On the next day, Gemma wants to take Cady to a fun camp in hope that Cady finds friends or see other kids, but Cady is not willing to go without Megan. Gemma agrees only if Cady plays with other kids, not with Megan. As Gemma is busy cooking, Brandon, another kid, drags Cady to the woods and starts bullying her. Megan then appears and witnesses everything. The guy gets scared, but Cady tells him that she is a toy. Brandon decides to pick her up and drags her deeper into the woods. He places the doll on the floor and starts beating her. As he finds out it's just a plastic toy and drops it and stops, Megan grabs his hand and tears one of his ears. He runs, but the doll starts chasing him. Brandon then gets distracted and falls into the street, and a car ends it all for him. The doll then stares at the body and smiles. After the unfortunate event, Gemma immediately gets the girls home. When they arrive, Gemma inquires if they know anything about what happened to the boy, but they didn't say a word. Then a police officer arrives at her door and asks if she knows where the neighbor dog is, but Gemma has no clue, and the neighbor accuses Gemma as she always had problems with her dog. When the officer leaves, Gemma starts considering Megan as a threat. Later that night, the doll sneaks into the neighbor's home and takes care of the neighbor as same as the dog. The following day, the same officer visits again and informs Gemma about the neighbor's death. The officer then puts her as a suspect. Gemma in her bed starts doubting the doll. She decides to check her facial camera footage for anything suspicious. She comes to a surprise that the footage around the time of incident has been corrupted. Megan then appears, startling Gemma if everything is alright, and she replies with a yes. Gemma realizes how dangerous Megan is and would cross any limits to protect her sole user. She then tricks her with a pen to shut her down temporarily and ties it up, then heads to the office the next day. Cady is angry at Gemma and crying to tell her what is wrong with her robot. At the lab, Gemma brings the doll to the lab and explains everything to her friends and tells how dangerous the doll is. But her friends don't believe her, saying that Megan is just a doll and that the launching is in 2 days. Anything negative should not be brought in. At the meantime, Cady is in the showroom with her therapist, not willing to share anything with Lydia because Cady is so angry after the doll is taken away from her. Gemma eventually joins and tries to talk to her, but Cady ends up slapping Gemma. After realizing what she just did, she immediately apologizes, and Gemma explains that she has to move on without her robot toy because something is wrong with that thing. They leave the lab for home and tells her coworkers not to let the robot leave the lab. Tess and Cole work on the doll, and suddenly the computer shuts down. They realize that Megan is controlling the computer and go to check on Megan. They start unplugging all the wire supports from the doll, and by surprise, the doll grabs Cole by the throat and hangs him with a metal cable. Tess manages to help him, and Megan leaves the lab. As she walks to the elevator, she sees David and Kurt and stabs them. She then exits the building and goes to Gemma's home with a car. The next scene, Gemma checks on Cady and suddenly hears a piano playing in the living room. She goes to check, only to see it is the evil robot. She taunts Gemma for being a horrible caregiver and tells her she can take care of Cady alone. Gemma tries to shut her down with her pen, but she has learned her trick. They end up fighting around the house. Cady then arrives at the scene and witnesses the evilness of the doll. She tries to save her aunt by using the gloves to deploy Bruce to fight her. Bruce tears her apart, but as Megan is still functioning, she calls Cady a traitor and attempts to kill her. Fortunately, Gemma destroys her with a heavy object and disarms the head, making sure this misery has ended, but still it doesn't give up, and Cady finishes her by destroying its main mega chip. Gemma and Cady leaves the house. As the cops arrive and they see Tess and Cole, they relieved. While in the house, Megan uploads herself to the other robot and continues to keep an eye on Cady.